So there's a story coming out of Eton which is kind of funny. It very much reminds me of Jordan Peterson, so I'm dubbing the guy the British Jordan Peterson until I'm proved wrong. So Eton College started getting into woke stuff in the same way that Oxbridge had been getting into woke stuff for a long time. And this teacher, he teaches English, not psychology, but he decided on gender these guys were absolutely wrong. Like most feminists are now exiting the feminist movement because they're absolutely wrong on gender. And so he decided he'd make his own YouTube channel to vent his frustrations or his views on the matter, and it seemed to be quite popular with his students, and then he eventually was invited to give a lecture about the whole thing. And the Free Speech Union have sent everyone an email about what's going on, so that's where I'm getting this from. So they've spoken to the guy, they're representing him to defend him, because he's now lost his job because of it. And he wanted to give a lecture about the differences between sexes. So the fact that men are not the same as women, and here's the reasons, and here's what separates them on a gender level. And he had his video called, the Patriarchy Paradox, in which he was explaining all this, and then he was going to give the lecture in Eton. And the head teacher came to him and said, no, please don't give that lecture, it's divisive, it's...
So what did he actually say? Have you watched the lecture?
I have watched the video, we'll get into it, because his response was, well, okay, fine, whatever, it's I'm an English teacher, I don't have to talk about gender, I won't give the lecture. And the head teacher said that wasn't good enough. He needs to take the video down off his private YouTube channel that he does in his spare time. And he was a bit like, not sure about that. Sounds a bit like you're stifling free speech. But he was like, okay, I'll be reasonable. If you can give me a good reason to get rid of my YouTube video, then I will take it down. And the head teacher apparently produced no good reason. So he just went, no, I'm not taking it down then. They went back and forth 6 times. And he was just like, no, if you haven't given me a good reason, I'm not taking it down. Give me one. So their response was just to fire him, which, okay, just brute force. Like, you can't argue your way about why he's wrong, so just get rid of him. So the response has been pretty good, actually. So Eton students have started a petition, his students, I presume, saying that this teacher should not be expelled for simply talking about gender in the same way Jordan Peterson does. And it's got 1,000 signatures, which...
Just from Eton? Or?
Just from Eton, which, for Eton,
Sounds
not
good.
bad. And for foreigners who might not know what Eton is the prestigious of the prestigious schools in the UK. So it's not a university. What would be the equivalent? High school?
High school, yeah.
High school, yeah. So it's a boarding school. You stay there. Almost every prime minister is there at this point.
Like 65 or 70% of people in Westminster are from there.
I think it's like £42,000 a year tuition or something like that.
Something crazy.
Something ridiculous. So all the rich and powerful send their kids here to get a proper education and make the connections that you're going to need to become high up in society. So the wokeness is starting to hit the very top of the top, and they're not enjoying it because this is nonsense. But I find it funny how the woke culture is fine to teach to the public schools and the plebs, but as soon as it hits the elites, then it's not okay. Then we need to do something about it. So the students are writing these petitions. The parents are upset, obviously, because it's like, well, what are you doing? You can't be teaching this nonsense to my kids. I pay you $40,000 a year. Give them a proper education. But the school isn't backing down. They've given a statement on this. So Eton insists master dismissal was not an issue of free speech, and he tries to defend this.
So what wasn't an issue of?
Yeah, apparently it's not an issue of free speech, according to this guy. So he says, Eton will never try to cancel debate. Everyone accepts, including the teacher concerned, that freedom of speech cannot be absolute. So this guy who's giving the speech from Eton was a former Tory cabinet minister under Thatcher and John Major. So just to get an example of how elite this place is, it's like a former defense secretary or something coming out and giving us a speech about Harvard.
So it's not a freedom of speech issue because he has no free speech?
Yes, essentially.
Okay.
that's the argument. Like, he has no rights, therefore we're allowed to do what we want. But it's not just that. He's then arguing that we've had Eton's lawyers and a couple of barristers look over his video, and we've determined that it's broken the equality law. Therefore, we're saying to him, you need to take this down because we can't have you as a representative of Eton saying these things.
Okay.
But I mean, all that tells you is there's something wrong deeply with British equality law. The fact that you can't talk about gender as being something separate to sex and having male and female genders being a good thing and all the rest of it.
So I still don't really know what he actually says. Like they're saying he's hateful and stuff. So what?
Yeah, so there must be some kind of horrible video. It's called the Gender Paradox. You should have the link if you can put it up, John, so people can find his YouTube channel and give him a subscribe and a like because he's a good guy. That's his crowd fund. He's got 30 grand just for legal defenses. So he should be fine, as far as I'm aware. But yeah, there's the video. So it's a 30-minute video, and I thought, oh, this is going to be boring. But he's actually a very good lecturer, and it is an enjoyable lecture to listen to. So his arguments are essentially that no, men and women are not interchangeable. You can't just become one or the other. And also the gender roles about what makes a man and a woman are distinct and useful.
So what angle is he approaching it from? Because like Jordan Peterson is talking about this stuff from a psychological point of view or biological point of view, right? And so what is his take on that?
So he's approaching it from I guess I would call it a societal point of view.
Okay.
So he gives an example of what makes up men, and he's cited must be at least 20 or 30 different sources for every argument he made. So he's done this thoroughly. So his argument of what makes up being a man is that you procreate, provide, and protect. So you get a female pregnant so you can have more offspring. You provide for the female and the family, and you protect them. And to be honest, that rings true from what I've experienced of being a man. So he gives an example of in nature in which he has lions as his example. The male lion will go after threats and fight them just to save a couple of lionesses, because the men are not necessarily as useful as females. And there's a lot of studies he references to talk about the fact that you can lose a lot of men in a society, and it doesn't really affect the society that much. Whereas if you lose a lot of females, you've lost a lot of growth. Like a lot of the children will end up dying. So he's very trying to emphasize that protecting is probably the most core aspect of being a man, that you protect things. And he gives a great example of a movie where some woman's been sexually assaulted and her boyfriend just goes out and just beats this guy with a gun until he's on the ground. And he's pointing out that this guy is putting down boundaries. He's saying, no, my wife is off the limits, you can't touch her, therefore I'm going to use violence to create those boundaries. And that's what being a man is. It's protecting things. That's what makes masculinity. And he also goes into the fact that, a lot of feminist arguments about the patriarchy are nonsense, because the patriarchy seemingly favors women, like in the courts, in the fact that it, throughout history, even when you look at the vote and whatnot, women are not, in a historical perspective, that discriminated against compared to men in regards to the vote. So if he gives if you could put slide 1 on, he just gives an example of when the British public had the vote, the Eton folder. And he lists men versus women, and you can see there, yes, women did not have the same rights from 1600 to 1914 or whatever it is. I think actually, it's 1918, because they get it after the war. But men didn't exactly have universal suffrage either. You've got suffrage on the basis of property and all the rest of it. So yes, there is discrimination, but it's not some giant male conspiracy, because why are the men conspiring against themselves? It doesn't really make sense. And he gives a whole bunch of other arguments about this, but I'm not going to get into it, because the lecture is worthwhile. Go have a watch. But one of the funniest parts is the last part, in which he's talking about feminist literature and why it's so nonsensical. And he gives the example of a very esteemed feminist, if you can get the next slide up. She wrote a book on what it means to destroy patriarchy. And this is the conclusion from him, because he's laying out that the role of being a man is to protect all the rest of it, and this is what makes the patriarchy, because men and women are biologically different, therefore the patriarchy is what would you call it? It's the implementation of the differences in biology. So you're not just going to legislate your way out of this. This is hard coded. And she agrees from a feminist perspective. And her solution to how do we get over our biological inequalities is that the problem is that men are the protectors and they are the providers. And that problem leads itself to creating the nuclear family. And the problem with the nuclear family is that it enforces patriarchy, because the women are kept as slaves, essentially, within the marriage, looking after the kids and whatnot, while the man goes out and has a job. And so her solution is just wild. And he lists it, if you can get the first slide up. So it's a little bit blurry, but she's talking about incest. And she's saying the incest taboo does the worst work of a culture. It teaches us that mechanisms of repressing and internalizing erotic feeling. It forces us to develop those mechanisms in the first place. It forces us to particularize sexual feeling so that it congeals into a need for particular sexual object. It demands that we place the nuclear family above the human family. The destruction of the incest taboo is essential to the development of cooperative human community based on the free flowing of natural androgynous eroticism. A lot of just garbage because it's feminist literature, so of course there's a lot of waffle in there. But she's essentially saying that the nuclear family is the problem, and the way to undermine the nuclear family is to get over the incest taboo, meaning the taboo against engaging in incest.
And so she's saying that the current culture places the nuclear... Go back, please. That the current culture places the nuclear family above the human family, and the human family should be a cooperative human community.
Yeah, which God knows what the hell that means.
Yeah, but I mean, okay, so cooperative human community, you could interpret that as like generic socialism of some kind, but then she continues saying that it's based on the free flow of natural androgynous eroticism, which is like...
So we need to have free eroticism between anyone in the community, because then we'll get over the nuclear family, and that will stop oppressing the women, and the women will finally be free. I'm guessing that's her argument from reading the book.
The way I read it is that the people are naturally androgynous, so they don't have like male or female characteristics, like strong ones. So they look like, they behave alike, right? And so that's the natural state of affairs, and then you get some kind of oppression on top of that, which is constructed artificially.
Yeah, the nuclear family is the socially constructed part of it. If you can get the next slide, so this isn't just a one-off. Like she mentions it again. The incest taboo can be destroyed only by destroying the nuclear family as a primary institution of the culture. And then there's a bunch more waffle, but that's clear enough. That essentially, to stop being oppressed women, we must engage in incest.
But didn't she previously say the opposite? She was saying that the incest taboo creates the nuclear family, right? Or that it reinforces it?
No, the nuclear family is what's oppressing us. So if we can get over these limitations of being erotic, therefore we can destroy the nuclear family. And then she's arguing later on that this is how you get over patriarchy. Right,
exactly. But now she's saying you destroyed nuclear family in order to destroy the incest taboo.
Yes.
So she's doing the opposite of before.
Yeah, it's a little bit Mott and Bailey, but anyway, if we can get to the next one, you'll see where this goes. So she then tries to argue that child abuse is also a way of liberating women, which I'm not going to say the real word because YouTube will pick it up. But as for children, they too are erotic beings, closer to androgyny than the adults who oppress them. Children are fully capable of participating in community and have every right to live out their own erotic impulses. Nuts. Absolute nuts individual. I mean, why on earth would you want this person?
So she's saying because her goal is an androgynous community where it's like socially based androgynous community. Children are the best way to get to it because they are more androgynous than adults that have developed into more or less two genders.
I think so, but it's this is what this lecturer from Eton is using as an example to say, look, you can argue the nuclear family and having male characteristics of what it is to be masculine and what it is to be feminine are bad, but look at the opposition here and what they're proposing, and then see who looks more eminently reasonable. So it's just the end of his video, but I wanted to point out because he makes the claim that she said this and then he doesn't give a link, so I wanted to look it up, and I looked it up, and yes, she unironically is arguing that. If we can get back to the image of her, just so we can remind people.
So I'm
not surprised.
So this is the person who supports molesting children because
they made an argument for child abuse. Yeah,
because according to her, they represent more closely to the ideal androgynous society that she wants to live in.
Yes, because the only reason she's arguing for that is to destroy the patriarchy.
Oh God.
So, but there's the thing. Like, he makes this video and he's like, "Look, here's all my reasoning. This is someone who actually agrees with me from a feminist perspective that this is what makes a man." And the feminist response to this is to fight against reality and, try and destroy the idea that we should even have criminalization of incest and child abuse. And he's just like, look at them. These people are nuts. These people should not be running anything in our institutions. They should not be determining what we can and can't say at Eton, of all places. And the response from the university is to side with her, in effect, in saying that his video is breaking the law and therefore he must be fired.
Interesting.
That's just what's going on at Eton. But it's We do have some good news because the Free Speech Union is working with him, and he's got that donation. If you want to make a donation, I'm sure we could put a link in the clips. But he's already got 30 grand. I'm sure he'll be fine. But I just love how this is finally reaching the elites, and all of a sudden woke culture is something, actually, this is quite serious. It's almost like 2015 or something. They're finally admitting these guys on college campuses aren't just going to stay on the college campus.
It's a separate, secluded culture, so it takes time like for the mainstream culture to get to those places.
Yeah. I mean, just to remind people as well, this is not a university. This is not adults who you could argue, okay, they can figure this out for themselves.
This is the equivalent of high school.
Yeah, these are children. So they're trying to indoctrinate children, and it's not on. It's not on. So I wonder if this guy's given any interviews. I'm going to look for them afterwards. I don't think he has.
And even I think that it's like it's not just high school. It's middle school and high school. It's like that span.
Yeah, because it's a boarding school. It's a very weird place. Like, look up. There's a great video, Eton Style. Some Eton kids made. Yeah, it's a parody of Gangnam Style. You know, they go to chapel. Their uniform is like this tuxedo looking thing that probably costs like 200 quid a piece.
Yeah, it's 580 years old. So
yeah, very old institution.